In Russia, a blinding light shines in the dead of the night before a mysterious and magical mare descends upon the earth. In the blink of an eye, the magical mare bolts through a wheat field and takes off to the sky. The next morning, the owner of the wheat field is pissed. He calls his 3 sons to look at the horrible sight of their messed up wheat field, which is their main source of livelihood. The owner is sure that some rascal is playing games with him and did this to his field. To catch whoever did it, the owner tells his sons to guard the field at night before he leaves. Then the elder sons have their youngest brother named John do the job on their behalf because, after all, John is the nice guy and yes man of the family. Night falls and John is on duty, guarding the field. He tries to entertain himself by talking with a small hedgehog he caught earlier, but the sound of someone coming from afar startles him. As John gets ready to defend the farm, he finds himself dwarfed by a massive mare standing in front of him. John immediately recognizes the mare as the culprit who messed up the field last night. To ensure the mare won't run away, John climbs the watchtower and throws the rope around the mare's neck. The mare speeds off, dragging John along. Seeing John still behind her, the mare proceeds to speed away, breaking the watchtower. However, the stubborn John is still holding on to the rope as he gets dragged while on the broken watchtower. The mare then leaps high into the sky, causing John to fly along with her above the clouds. The view of the village from above the cloud is iconic, and John is so astonished that he starts joyfully shouting and waving. However, John's joy shatters when the mare abruptly lands, causing the watchtower to crash. Luckily, John is intact, but a little bit dizzy. However, the mare ends up stuck in a swamp and is about to drown. John decides to save her, so he tries hard to pull the rope around her neck, but to no avail. After all, the mare is too big and heavy for John to pull out of the swamp. Just then, a bright idea strikes John's mind. He ties the rope to the nearby watermill and powers it up. The mill starts gradually pulling the giant mare out of the swamp, allowing her to return to safety. John comes face to face with the mare, which then sheds a tear. John has her promise not to mess up his father's field before he removes the rope around its neck and lets her go. The mare thanks John before speeding off and flying to the sky, never to return. John is happy for the mare, but is shocked to see that the mare damaged the wheat field even more, for which his father will give him the beating of a lifetime. Dawn breaks, and John awakes in the stable to find a couple of black and magnificent horses looking at him. He's then startled by the sound of a strange creature that can talk. It tells John to put down his weapon, as it is here to talk to him. As John says no, the creature kicks him in the face and knocks him out. Not long after, John regains consciousness to find a small horse named Foal saying hello to him. It turns out, Foal is the son of the magical mare John saved last night. For this reason, the magical mare sent Foal to John, along with the magnificent horses as a gift to show gratitude to John. Hearing this, John is overjoyed. But his joy is short-lived when his father finds out that his whole wheat field got ruined. Seeing his enraged father coming to kill him, John is scared. But Foal has John hop on his back before he races out of the farm at a speed like roadrunners. Now, John is far away from the farm and is safe from his father's wrath. However, he realizes that he forgot to take the 2 black horses with him. Foal tells him not to worry before he makes a whistle that travels miles back to the farm. Hearing it, the horses respond to it and immediately speed off before John's father can capture them. Now that the horses are with him, John walks to the city. After getting there, John decides to sell the magnificent black horses, which then attract the attention of the most accomplished merchants. Foal tells him not to attract too much attention and sell the horses to any merchant that is away from the center. This way, he'll get rid of the unnecessary attention and will make more money at the same time. However, John doesn't listen to the advice and decides to sell the horses to the wealthiest man in the city, that is, the king. Not long after, the tyrant king comes out to the balcony and spots the black horses with John. The king drools over the beauty of the animals and gets greedy. While everybody is trying to buy the horses from John, he comes face to face with the old king, who wonders how a poor farmer like John owns such magnificent horses. Based on that, the king falsely concludes that John must have stolen them. So instead of paying John for them, the king decides to take the horses for free. John is left speechless as he has to watch the king leave with his horses for free. John says sorry to Foal for not listening to his advice, but luckily, Foal has a plan B. He whistles to the horses to call them back, and the horses respond to the call and burst out of the gates of the king's palace. While carried on the wagon by his guards, the king chases the horses, but the wagon flips, and the king ends up falling on a pile of flour sacks, while Jon is overjoyed when his horses return to him. After the guards pull the king out of the wagon, the king is covered with flour and starts feeling embarrassed. Looking at the embarrassed king, Jon laughs his heart out, which comes as a stab to the king's ego, who then decides to have Jon executed. However, the king's men advise him against it, since doing this will make the king appear as a tyrant in front of his people, as Jon hasn't done anything illegal. The king decides to repress his hatred towards Jon. He starts acting like a gentleman and asks Jon how much he needs for the horses. Since the king is filthy rich, Jon bids high, shocking the king and his courtiers. One courtier advises the king not to pay Jon, since the horses will keep coming back to him. For this reason, the king offers Jon a job at his palace as payment for the horses. Jon happily says yes and takes the horses and foal along with him to the palace. That night, the king tries to peacefully sleep, but as soon as he closes his eyes, he dreams of Jon dancing and getting more popular with the people. Worst of all, the king gets beheaded. Just then, he snaps awake from this nightmare and screams in horror. At this point, he becomes more insecure and hateful toward Jon. The next morning, the king watches Jon do his job from afar, and everybody seems to love him. This makes the king jealous, so he decides to get rid of Jon by any means necessary. A nasty idea comes to the courtier's mind. He suggests to the king that he send Jon off on a deadly mission and have him capture Firebird. Hearing the idea, the king loves it and says yes, convinced that Jon will die on this mission. Also, if Jon fails and returns empty-handed, the king will have him executed. Jon gets ready for the mission, but Foal warns him not to go since Firebird is incredibly dangerous. Many knights tried capturing it, but they failed miserably, and Firebird easily killed them. However, after Jon's insistence, Foal and Jon take the challenge and set out to capture Firebird. On the way, the two arrive at a forest where nuts grow. Foal tells Jon that Firebird loves eating nuts, which is only located in this forest. After Jon finds the tree where those nuts grow, he tries to eat one. However, Foal gently kicks him in the back and warns him not to do that because these nuts are more like tranquilizers. Once Firebird eats a lot of nuts, it'll be put to sleep. Hearing this, Jon loves the idea and decides to bag some. Later, the two arrive at the mysterious place in the middle of the desert where Firebird lives and lie in wait for it to appear until night falls. To lure the legendary Firebird, Jon scatters the nuts all over the sand. To Jon's joy, the plan works as Firebird takes the bait and lands to eat the nuts. After eating a dozen of them, Firebird becomes dizzy and starts staggering until it falls to the ground. Thinking they captured the legendary Firebird, Jon is super excited and decides to tell the asleep foal the good news. Just then, Firebird shows up from behind Jon and takes a nut from his bag. This scares Jon, so he immediately runs for his life before Firebird chases him. Just as Firebird is about to catch him, Foal hits Firebird, allowing Jon to run further. Foal ends up stuck in the dry quicksand and Firebird towers over him, but before it can kill him, Jon distracts it. That allows Foal to get away and run with Jon before Firebird chases them and sets the whole trees on fire. Luckily, Foal and Jon make it out alive, but Firebird still stands in front of them. Jon throws a nut, and Firebird eats it, causing it to black out and fall into the lake. The next morning, Jon takes the unconscious Firebird out of the lake and chains it up. As Firebird wakes up, it sheds a tear of fire, and Jon is deeply touched by this sight. If Firebird remains on the ground for much longer, its flames will be put out for good, and it'll lose its powers. For this reason, Jon unchains the Firebird before it stands tall, and the flames on its feathers are back on. After it gives the two a nod of respect, it flies away, but leaves behind one of its burning feathers for Jon as a sign of gratitude for sparing it. After returning to the city, the king decides to have Jon executed for failing to capture Firebird. To save himself, Jon shows the burning feather to the king and the people to prove that he did catch Firebird. However, the feather is not burning anymore, and the king mockingly laughs at him and has the executioner carry on with the execution. But before Jon is beheaded, Firebird's feather starts glowing again before the legendary Firebird himself flies over the city with its burning feathers to save Jon and return the favor. Seeing it, John is super happy, and the people start seeing John as a hero since Firebird's arrival at John's call is a miracle and proof of his success at the mission. As the people cheer for John, the king is forced to spare John and declare him a hero to the people. Now, the Firebird is more like John's servant. Whenever John whistles for it, Firebird obeys John's orders and makes his wings glow. That does nothing but fuel the king's hatred toward John, because John is kind of irreplaceable at this point, and he can't get rid of him. Along with his courtiers, the king thinks about how to get rid of John. Just then, an idea comes to the courtier's mind. He suggests sending John off on another deadly mission as a matchmaker to bring in the Tsar Maiden from the Ice Country for the king to marry. Convinced that John will fail this mission, the king is fond of the idea because he'll have a reason to execute John. Not long after, the city's messenger declares the king will marry the Tsar Maiden from the Ice Country. As John decides to get this mission done, Foal tells him the Ice Kingdom is guarded by 2 strong knights. Based on that, bringing the Tsar Maiden will be quite dangerous. But despite that, John insists on going and getting that mission done. After traveling miles through the snow, John and Foal climb the mountain and arrive at the Ice Kingdom. To their surprise, no knights are guarding the gates, so John rushes and tries to walk in but bumps into a magical ice barrier. John and Foal try to think of a way to get inside, but Firebird's burning feather melts the barrier, turning it into water that freezes afterward. After witnessing this, John is astonished but looks at Foal only to find that he's not there as the water sent him flying down the cliff and encased him in a ball of ice. Fortunately, Foal survives the fall and doesn't get injured. Meanwhile, John takes off his shoes that got stuck in the ice and walks inside. After finding the virgin named the Tsar Maiden, John introduces himself as the matchmaker and tells her why he's here. However, the Tsar Maiden tells him she doesn't want to marry anyone because to her, heroes and brave knights no longer exist. She then walks out and jumps off the cliff to test how heroic John is. Having a heart of gold, John decides to jump to save her, but is surprised after seeing her use her dress as a parachute. John tries to hold on to her dress, but quickly loses his grip and falls. The Tsar Maiden saves him afterward and has him sit on her dress. However, John accidentally rips her dress with his foot, putting the Tsar Maiden and himself in danger of falling to their deaths. Just then, Foal spots them falling and spreads his wings to fly to their rescue. After Foal saves them, they stop at a place where they can light a fire and have some rest. While the Tsar Maiden is napping, Foal talks to John in private. He tells John to abandon her the next morning and never return to the city. However, John is committed to taking the Tsar Maiden to the king and getting this impossible mission done. Overhearing this, the Tsar Maiden is impressed by John's loyalty and commitment. The next day, John returns to the city along with the Tsar Maiden, and the people hail him a hero for his success at such an impossible task. The king becomes more hateful of John now that he's forced to reward him with a heavy heart. John is rewarded with some expensive golden items. However, none of that gold is good enough to make him happy, as he loves the Tsar Maiden now, and she is the only reward that he wants. Later at night, John opens up to Foal and tells him about his love for the Tsar Maiden. Soon after, he climbs to the window of her chamber to express his love for her and give her some flowers, impressing her. Just then, the two are interrupted when the king's courtier knocks on the Tsar Maiden's door. To ensure John never gets spotted, the Tsar Maiden shoves the flowers to his face and closes the window to avoid suspicion. After the king's courtiers come in, they bring some fancy dresses for the Tsar Maiden to prepare her before she meets the king. However, the Tsar Maiden doesn't want to impress the king, so she takes the courtier's pirate clothes. Walking into the king's court, the Tsar Maiden doesn't recognize the king that she confuses him with one of the younger courtiers. The king bursts out and introduces himself. The Tsar Maiden says sorry to the king, saying she mistook him for a clown after looking at his clothes. The king then greets her and starts talking about their marriage. However, the Tsar Maiden doesn't want to marry a man 3 times her age. For this reason, she decides to delay the marriage. So she says yes to the king, but on one condition. She wants to wear her grandmother's ring, which is lost in the middle of the ocean. The king summons John and decides to have him do the impossible job of finding the ring, to which John says yes. That night, while John is asleep, Foal sees the figure of a whale flying and figures out where the ring is by looking at the way the wind blows. The next day, Foal takes John to where the ring is. As the duo arrive there, a group of birds dart toward them, causing John to fall off Foal's back to end up at the bottom of the ocean. John swims back up only to find a towering wave charging at him, but Foal saves him in time before the two spot a gigantic chained-up whale. Seeing the duo, the whale starts making sounds, and Foal interprets them to learn that the whale has 100 ships trapped inside him, for which he got chained up as a punishment. Feeling sorry, the whale tears up. John decides to help the whale and free it from the gigantic chain. Just then, John has a genius idea. The only way to free it is to cause it to sneeze, and that can only be done if Foal flies inside the whale's nostrils. Foal says yes to the idea and flies inside. As he does so, Foal tickles the whale's nostrils with his wings, causing the whale to sneeze and send the duo flying out of it as it starts moving, breaking the huge chains in the process. What's more, the ships that were trapped inside the whale for years are finally set free. As the duo rest on the shore, they watch the whale dive back into the ocean. Not long after, the whale sends the duo the ring they're looking for as a thank you gift. With the ring found, the mission is accomplished. Later, John secretly comes back to the city in the dead of the night and tries sneaking inside the king's palace to give the ring to the Tsar Maiden. But as he tries to unlock the window, the king's courtier spots him from afar. John makes it to the Tsar Maiden's chamber and gives her the ring. Just then, the guards break into the room and try to catch him. Hearing the noise, the king wakes up and grabs his gun. He goes to the balcony, and when spotting Foal standing on the ledge, the king shoots him, while John gets arrested after getting falsely accused of trying to kidnap the Tsar Maiden. The night after, the Tsar Maiden hears a sound outside her chamber. She opens the door to find a chick waiting for her, which then leads her to Foal outside, who managed to survive the gunshot. When Foal asks the Tsar Maiden about John, she assures him she came up with a plan to save him from execution. Earlier that day, the Tsar Maiden told the king she wanted to marry a young man, and luckily, there's an old recipe that can make the king look much younger. That recipe is to have the king bathe in 3 cauldrons, one of boiling water, the second of ice water, and the third of boiling milk. The king loved this idea and was about to say yes. However, the courtier interrupts them and suggests trying this recipe on John first. The king happily says yes, confident that the recipe will fail and that John will eventually get killed. Back to the present, the Tsar Maiden tells Foal she can save John from the first 2 cauldrons, but can't save him from the third. The only way to save him is by using the flower of life and death. That's why the Tsar Maiden has Foal bring it. And even though his wing is wounded from the gunshot, Foal sets out to find that flower. The next day, the 3 cauldrons are brought to the king, and people gather from all over the city to watch. After the king has the imprisoned John stand before the people to have him executed, the people demand that to hear John out. The king allows John to say his last words, and John tells the people he loves the Tsar Maiden. Having heard enough, the king interrupts John and pushes him to the first cauldron of boiling water, convinced that John won't survive. However, the Tsar Maiden takes off her grandmother's ring and throws it into the cauldron, propelling John out of the first cauldron into the air to then end up in the second where the ice water is. Just then, Firebird flies above and drops one of its burning feathers into the icy water. Before John freezes to death, the feather sends him flying out of the second cauldron to end up in the third where the boiling milk is. Without the flower of life and death, John will die in the third cauldron. Fortunately, Foal managed to find this flower last night. As he tried to talk to it, the flower told Foal that if anyone plucked it, he'd die. However, Foal plucked it anyway, wanting to save his friend's life. Now, John is still inside the third cauldron. He is seemingly dead, and the crowd of people who love him so much start leaving in despair. Just then, Foal drops the flower of life and death into the third cauldron, only for John to emerge from the third cauldron, well-dressed and more handsome than before. Seeing him, the people are super happy, and so is the Tsar Maiden. John glides back to the platform. The king starts to undress and prepares to bathe in the cauldrons, thinking that the Tsar Maiden's recipe worked. He jumps into the first cauldron but gets trapped inside a bubble that takes him away from the city, while the people laugh at him and tell him good riddance. Now that the people have no king, they start wondering who their next king will be. They all then agree to crown John as their new king, and John is honored and happy to accept before he takes the Tsar Maiden's hand and announces her to be his wife. Just then, John misses Foal and starts asking where he is, so he and the Tsar Maiden look for him before they find him lying in a pit. thinking that he'll die after plucking that flower. But the Tsar Maiden tells Foal the flower was just testing his bravery and reassures him that he'll live. John hugs his friend, and the trio live happily ever after, knowing that they own a city.